All we've got to do now is to start pumping.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. I am your host, Marcus Whitman. Today we are going to be recapping the Week 6 slate of games, doing the Patreon mailbag as well. Before we get started, I do want to remind you that this show and this channel are brought to you by my Patreon and my patrons over there on patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy, where you will get exclusive content. Going to be putting up my Week 7 NFL picks tomorrow. Also put up a Trey Lance rookie debut film room last week. You'll also get access to submit questions to the mailbag for this show that we're going to get into at the end of the show here. I do just ask that you slip into the DMs and lead with mailbag question if you do sign up, so I don't miss your question. And on top of all of that, you will support this channel and this show. None of this would exist without my patrons, so thank you so much to everybody that does support me over there and to everyone that is considering signing up. But let's go ahead and go game by game. There's some games that were a little more exciting than others. You know, I would just say we've been spoiled up to this point. There's been some really amazing weeks of football. This one was a little bit more quiet, but still some really good games. So I want to start with what I felt was the best game this weekend, and that was Buffalo at Tennessee. Really went down to the wire. These are two playoff caliber teams going head to head on Monday Night Football. And, you know, this to me was much more about the Tennessee Titans kind of having that gotta have it win in this one. Because I'm not worried about Buffalo. I don't think they matched up particularly well. They're not a team that has this amazing run defense. And going against a Titans team that kind of did have their back against the wall and in their own kind of way. It's not that their season was over, but people weren't really looking at them seriously, and they knew that. At home, 7-point underdogs, they really just came out and punched the Bills in the mouth with their superstar running back Derrick Henry. So as far as the Bills side of this goes, they moved the ball just fine. Josh Allen was awesome, and I think they'll continue to be one of, if not the best team in the AFC. But for me, this was much more about the Titans putting themselves back on the map. And I just always appreciate a team kind of putting their foot down and having that physical aspect to their team. And that's definitely reflected by their head coach, Mike Vrabel, who's kind of a badass, Derrick Henry, who's a total badass, and A.J. Brown, who in this game, you know, was dealing with food poisoning. He went to the tent early on. He's also been battling injuries this year. I feel like when he went to the tent, not to speculate, I feel like he was probably throwing up. And he tweeted after the game, he's like, that's the last time I ever do fast food. We've all been there. But, yeah, I mean, this was just kind of a badass win from the Titans. And it did not come easy. The one thing I will say about the Bills before I talk a little bit more about the Titans is that there was a controversial decision late in this game. This really did come down to the wire. And the Bills could have kicked the field goal to send this game to overtime. Instead, on 4th and 1, they run a QB sneak, and they actually did not get it. And a lot of people were questioning if that was the right decision. And to me, this was the perfect example of process over results. I totally stand by the Bills, who have this freaky 6'5" quarterback. You know, the probability of them converting that on 4th and 1 is very high, certainly higher than 50%. The probability of them stopping Derrick Henry in overtime if they lose the coin toss, that seems less than getting a yard on 4th and inches. So I totally stand by McDermott's decision to go for it here for the Bills. I think it's one of those deals that you just got to look at the process in that situation. It's just one game, and you go back to the drawing board and try to pick up a win next week. And it's really not the end of the world, but I will stand by McDermott's decision to go for it there, especially given the state of overtime rules in the NFL right now. And if they did lose that coin toss, I don't like their chances of stopping Derrick Henry and the Titans offense. Yeah, that Bills defense was gassed, and they'd given up 31 points or whatever it was at that point. I think they made the right call. As for the Titans, I have a couple of points here. I talked about A.J. Brown kind of being that total badass, as he always is, but doing it in a different way with the food poisoning. And he came back and battled through and had a big second half for them and was a big reason they ended up winning this game. But Derrick Henry, I feel like he's basically solidified his Hall of Fame career at this point. I know he hasn't played that long, but it's going to take a lot for Derrick Henry not to be a Hall of Famer. I think you look at his resume as far as potential now to have back-to-back 2,000-yard seasons, right? He got up to 2,000 yards last year. I'm really not a stats guy, but I do see a lot of Derrick Henry stats where you look back on it and you're like, wow, we really are witnessing something special, a Hall of Fame talent, and genuinely one of the best running backs ever. Now, of course, as with any running back, there is an element of help that he needs. You know, his big touchdown would not have been possible without an outstanding block by number 15 for the Titans, the receiver. It's one of these no-name guys, Westbrook Akina or something like that. He had an outstanding lead block coming out of that wing tight end position down the field that really sprung Henry loose. So any kind of elite running back performance, you're going to require some good element of blocking, but the fact that he does have the speed and vision and just rare foot speed at his size. You know, he's not shifty per se. He's not going to make you miss in space. He's not a very good route runner in the receiving game, but he is agile. He can navigate holes very quickly, and it's enough to complement his long speed and, of course, his power. I mean, he had that stiff arm. He ended up losing 3 yards on the play because the blocking wasn't any good, but he brushed off. I want to say it was Mario Addison, who's about 260 pounds. He just brushed him off like, no, thank you, goodbye. Just it's unbelievable the power and speed that he has. So, and a huge game from Derrick Henry. Was it an MVP game from Derrick Henry? Look, my answer to that is still no. I mean, he had the one huge run that still was, you know, he needed great blocking in front of him. And then he had some other good runs in there, but at the end of the day, he had, 140 yards rushing? I mean, a great quarterback performance. You're looking at 300 and 400 yards of offense. It's just, you just can't compare the value of the position, but it doesn't mean we can't applaud Derrick Henry for being genuinely one of the best running backs of all time. If he keeps up this pace, he will be finishing in that conversation with guys like Peyton and Sanders and Tomlinson and Adrian Peterson, I think would be my top 4, but I'm probably leaving someone out. But you get the point. I mean, Derrick Henry continues to make that case, and it's worth talking about, even though he's a running back. Any other notes in this game? For the Titans defense, it's still not very good, and Caleb Farley, it looks like, is going to be done for the season with a torn ACL, which is just so tragic. I mean, Farley was just starting to get out there. If you remember back to draft time, Caleb Farley was a cornerback that they drafted out of Virginia Tech who was dealing with a microdiscectomy injury, which has to deal with the discs in between the blades of his spine or whatever. I probably said that wrong, but basically this was an injury that was going to take some time to recover, but the thought was hopefully once he does recover, it doesn't come back. And he was starting to get back in the game. He played 28 snaps last week. And ironically, right around that same point this week, he goes down with the knee injury, which you would think is completely unrelated to the back injury that he had coming into the season. Just super unfortunate for the Titans because it was an injury risk, but I don't think this is related to those medical red flags that did cause Farley to drop to the end of the first round, whereas he was a genuinely elite cornerback prospect on the field. So really unfortunate injury there. It is going to hurt a secondary that is reeling a little bit right now, but there is a little bit to say here. This did feel to me like the first week that the Titans kind of remade pass rush kind of came together. They did just enough to make Josh Allen uncomfortable, and Allen still had a great game, but those 4 guys up front, that was really their focal point, was to really remake that pass rush where you bring in Bud Dupree for a massive contract. He had a decent game. Jeffrey Simmons, you hope, takes that next step up, and he's been outstanding. He has the, was it a big sack at the end of this game or a stuff on 4th and 1? Forgive me, my memory's escaping me. I know he made a big play at the end of the game there, but Harold Landry is up there in the league for pressures this year. They're going to have a big decision to make on his contract that's expiring this year. And then Danico Autry was outstanding in this game as well, who was another decent free agent signing for them. So those four up front, hoping to kind of remake that pass rush. And, even if Farley is done for the year, if you can get after the quarterback better, it is going to lighten the load on the guys in the secondary. And they still have guys, right? They still got Jack Rabbit, who's not playing great this year, but he's still an experienced veteran. You've got Christian Fulton, who's been solid this year, Elijah Moulton in the slot. The safeties have been playing well here. So this defense can still continue to shape into form. This team really had about as many moving parts on that side of the ball as anybody out there. So it wasn't a great defensive performance, but you could kind of see the plan slowly start to shape into place. And if that can happen, that's going to be big news for the Tennessee Titans as far as not just making the playoffs, because, excuse me, this division's, it's not going to take much for them to win this division, especially with the Colts at 2-4. But if they want to repeat this performance against a team like the Bills or the Chiefs, who we're going to see them play this weekend, by the way, that defense is going to get really put to the test this week. But I think if they want to be taken very seriously as like a Super Bowl team, that they do need this defense to continue to figure some stuff out. But this was, I feel like, one step towards that. And that's Vrabel's job, is to fix this defense as the head coach there. So that's Buffalo at Tennessee. I do think that was the most interesting game this week, the one I'm probably going to spend the most time on, because a lot of these games just either weren't close or I didn't have a lot of takeaways from, but that doesn't mean we're not going to have stuff to talk about. So Tampa Bay at Philly was the Thursday night game last week. And from Tampa Bay's perspective, like I said, there's nothing else to really add. Like, yeah, they're dealing with some injuries in the secondary, but they have so much talent still around that well-coached defense that they put together a good game plan. And ultimately, it didn't really matter because of how bad Jalen Hurts played, which is what I really want to focus on in this game. But I do need to reiterate how unbelievable Tampa Bay's offense is and was in this game. They were quite literally getting whatever they wanted whenever they wanted. They have an answer to every single thing you want to throw at them. Like, they can run the ball. If you want to have a light box and try to take away these receivers, they can run the ball. Leonard Fournette has power. They have an outstanding run-blocking group. Brady understands the numbers, and he's not going to hand the ball off to his running back if they don't have an unfavorable running matchup in that situation. And then you get to the passing game. They do play action very well. Brady does not make mistakes. The ball is out. You can't get to him because you have this perfect combination of dominant pass-protecting offensive line. You have Tom Brady, who navigates the pocket as well as anybody and also gets rid of the ball. You just can't get to him in time. So you have that aspect of it. And then as far as the receiving game and the concepts that they run, like Antonio Brown is prime Antonio Brown again. He is fast and uncoverable on these crossing routes, and he's got this elite route running release combination. He has become the number one receiver for the Bucs, which is just incredible considering even if you manage to take him away, you're still dealing with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. Godwin, who is an incredible tough cover with a ton of speed. He can win at any level of the defense. He'd be the number one receiver for a bucket of teams in the NFL. So you got to deal with him. You got to take away Mike Evans somehow. He's not the hardest cover in the NFL, but you still have Brady with elite ball placement who's just going to put it up for 6'5" Mike Evans. Like, even if you take away Godwin, you take away the run game, you take away Antonio Brown, well, guess what? You still are putting the Bucs in a situation where they're probably getting a 50-50 ball, but with Mike Evans and Tom Brady, it's like a 70-30 ball. Oh, and by the way, Gronk is going to be back soon, who's just another option to give that to, where if you do cover them up, you're getting that elite chemistry, elite catch in traffic, and elite ball placement. There's just like nothing you can really do against this Bucs offense outside of like if you can somehow manage an elite pass rush game. I think is really the only way to truly slow this team down, because then you can come down to the box a little bit more and hopefully you can get to Tom Brady before these receivers separate down the field. But that's incredibly difficult to do because of the great pass protection that they have. So the Bucs offense, it's impossible to game plan against right now. And they could have had whatever they wanted against the Eagles, and they did. But this game was over at halftime, and they totally laid off the gas. So I do still think the Bucs are the best team in football, but we will talk about the Arizona Cardinals later, who are making a strong case for it. But I want to talk about Jalen Hurts for a second, and I think I'm ready to be out on Jalen Hurts because week one, it was like, okay, you got my attention. And you could see like the preparation and the offseason and the elite work ethic that everyone talks about with Jalen Hurts. He comes out week one in a favorable matchup against Atlanta, which is one of the worst defenses in the NFL, and the ball was out on time. He was relatively accurate. He scrambled when he needed to, and it was like, okay, he's working on some of his weaknesses, being the overwhelming amount of improvisational football that he plays. That was on his tape last year, and it looked like week one, okay, he's playing in structure more. He understands his role, and he's playing with more accuracy, which is also a big knock on Jalen Hurts. And then ever since week one, it's just been right back to that, frankly, backup caliber quarterback play. And it's to the point where Jalen Hurts just might be the worst starting quarterback in the NFL right now. And that's what we saw in this game was they got down big and they could not move the ball. I think they had like 60 passing yards at some point in the third quarter. Inaccurate throws, holding on to the ball too long, trying to use his feet way too much, just trying to be a magician back there. And that's just not how you win at quarterback in the NFL. Case in point, the guy on the other side of the ball that is the complete opposite and having a ton more success, granted in a more favorable situation, but it's not like the Eagles are a train wreck as far as the surrounding core. I do think this is a situation that you can look at Jalen Hurts and say, okay, he is passing up easy first reads, looking for too much. He is throwing balls into the dirt on critical downs and overthrowing deep balls. It's just not there from Jalen Hurts. He is genuinely playing like a backup quarterback right now, and it's trending downwards too, which is not what you want to see. This is a team with 3 first-round picks next year, and until he led this kind of comeback that, you know, the Bucs were backing off. They gave up in the second half. They were like, whatever, we'll walk out here with a win. They didn't end up covering, which was just a stupid bad beat, as the Eagles go for 2 to cover the spread before the game was over. But yeah, I mean, it was a point in this game where I'm sitting there like, Gardner Minshew's better than this, right? I mean, Gardner Minshew has played much better football for a Jacksonville Jaguars team than Jalen Hurts is playing for the Eagles right now. So I do think that's a question that the Eagles should start to entertain. I don't think they make that move quite yet. I think it is right to give Hurts ample amount of time, but I think that time is starting to run out. He doesn't have the traits to be a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL, and I think he's kind of heading towards being that like career backup, like Fitzpatrick, Tyrod Taylor caliber guy that can win you games in a pinch, but it's just not sustainable. So it was a rough outing for the Eagles offense because of Jalen Hurts' play at quarterback. Let's move on to our next game, Miami at Jacksonville. And the Jags end up winning this game. They come back, make a couple big field goals at the end of this game. And, you know, Jacksonville gets their first win. They've held on to Urban Meyer now for, 2 weeks since the big scandal. They've picked up a win. Their quarterback is playing really good football. And I haven't really changed my stance on what it is that Urban Meyer brings to the table. I still don't love the offense that he's, overseeing here. I still don't trust his personnel decisions. I certainly don't trust his leadership. But if you need something to hang your hat on for Jags fans, Trevor Lawrence looks like that dude. I mean, he goes back to the Bengals game, and now about the last 3 weeks, he looks like that franchise quarterback type of guy. Is it too early to say that? Maybe, but he just really passes the eye test. He's comfortable. He's calling checks at the line of scrimmage. He's navigating the pocket and pressure very well. He's commanding the ball down the field. He looks like a franchise quarterback here midway through the first season of his career, and that's what the expectations were. So it's kind of turning into this 2020 Chargers season at this point where all right, we're not a playoff team, but, and you got to remember, I think the Chargers started like 2-5 or something like that last year, but it turned into a deal where, okay, we've got a quarterback now. Let's build upon that. I still don't think they have the right coach, and that's really unfortunate, but it is something at least to hang your hat on for the Jags. As for the Dolphins, this is a team that is spiraling out of control. And I will say I told you so, and I'm only going to do that because Dolphins fans were assholes to me when I said, look, this team is due for regression. They are totally this year's, Bears or Jags, or every year it feels like there's a team that gets a crap ton of turnovers. They lean on defense. They win a bunch of close games, but their offense sucks. And then they come back the next year, and they're not just an average team that disappoints on their playoff expectations, but they're genuinely one of the worst teams in the league. And that's the Dolphins this year. They're not getting that same insane rate of turnovers, and you're seeing the defense take a step back. Now, they were out their top two corners in this game. I do think they'll play better defense moving forward, but that's just how the NFL works in 2021. Defense is incredibly dependent on who you're playing and how many times your opponent turns the ball over. And it's just not something that's going to sustain over time. And then you go to the Dolphins' offense, and this is everything that I was terrified of for this team. Tua actually wasn't bad in this game, and I'm not even really going to criticize Tua. He had a bad pick, but he made a lot of really good other throws. I don't really think Tua was the problem in this game. He wasn't the answer. He wasn't what Trevor Lawrence was on the other side for the Jags. I mean, that difference was uncanny. But you look at the pass protection, the play calling, the lack of a run game. It's just a disaster on the offensive side of the ball. They have no identity. It's a gimmicky college offense. When the Dolphins play a game, it feels like, and I think this is similar to what the Bears are doing in the fields right now, but when you see like those 35-point underdogs in college football, and you see them come out, and it's like, okay, RPO, screen, run, like true gimmick offense, like they're leaning on tricking the defense to survive long enough to escape with a win. That's what the Dolphins' offense is, with or without Tua. But especially with Tua, that's kind of their game plan. Jacoby was a little more just like run around and try to make something happen. Neither are sustainable options here. So this is a worst-case scenario for the Dolphins. And I tweeted, like right before the season started, I said, I'm ready for my boldest take of the season. And it went back to some criticism I had of them around the draft time. And my boldest take this year was the Dolphins have a real chance of being one of the 5 worst teams in the NFL this year and giving a top 5 pick to the Philadelphia Eagles because they made one of the dumbest moves of the offseason last year, and that was trading up from the 12th overall pick to the 6th overall pick after they had traded down from the 3rd overall pick. Okay, so they had the 3rd pick. They moved down to 12 with the 49ers. They got 2 extra first-round picks. Great move. I was fine with it. If you had to stick with Tua, which I wouldn't have, but if you had to stick with Tua, that's a good move. But they went from 12 back up to 6 while giving their first-round pick this year to the Eagles as if they were a lock to be a playoff team this year, to draft a receiver which couldn't have been further down their list of needs. They have Will Fuller. They have Preston Williams. They have Devontae Parker. They have Mike Gesicki. They need offensive line, not receivers. I said on draft night, I said the Dolphins would have been better off drafting either Penei Sewell or Justin Fields with that pick, and I think that's aging incredibly well. Jalen Waddle's fine. He's more than fine. He's really good, but it's not what the Dolphins need. And I also said they drafted him to be a bubble screen guy because you already have Will Fuller and you have a quarterback that just isn't commanding the ball down the field. It just, none of that made sense. And that's exactly what Waddle has been. I think he's averaging less than 10 yards a reception. He had 10 receptions for 70 yards. He's been exactly what I said Waddle would be, which is you aren't unlocking Jalen Waddle on the Miami Dolphins. If you're the Chargers or the Chiefs somehow got that pick, or the Packers or some of these teams with quarterbacks can really push the ball downfield, that's where Waddle would have been worth it. But the Dolphins just aren't capable of doing that for so many different reasons. It's not just Tua, it's the offensive line, it's the play calling. So this has been a complete nightmare for the Dolphins. An absolute tragedy. They are likely going to be giving a top 10 pick to the Philadelphia Eagles. It's possible to give a top 5 pick to the Philadelphia Eagles, and they're going to be sitting there with a quarterback in Tua that, let's face it, like Tua is not Trevor Lawrence. He's not going to be Justin Herbert. He's not going to be all of these unbelievable quarterbacks that are winning all these games right now. He could be fine, but he's going to be probably closer to what like Baker's been for the Browns or what Kirk or Tannehill are for their teams, where you're just not excited about it. So it's a mess for the Dolphins. I think I would look at Greer first, the general manager there. Flores deserves some criticism as well because I think he's involved in the decision-making there. But the front office for the Dolphins, I've been extremely critical of, and Dolphins fans have been very, very unhappy with my analysis of the team. But I couldn't be more proud of how this has played out because they've missed on these picks, and they haven't won games in the ways that sustain in the NFL, which is high-level offense, passing the ball deep, and winning on defense with high-end pass rush and elite-level coverage, which they've had really good coverage, but it's been spotty, and it's been very dependent on turnovers. So it's just not working for the Dolphins right now. I think it's getting close to time to putting Flores on the hot seat, which I always say the hot seat comes before any firing conversation. I think he's got a chance to kind of turn this defense back around throughout the season with getting some of these guys back, but the offense is just a nightmare. So that's the deal with the Dolphins. I don't really want to repeat that every single week. It just kind of felt like the right time to get that out, and that was a terrible loss against the Jags team that they need to beat. I mean, they're 1-5 now. Like, this thing is sliding downhill. Okay, we got the Raiders at the Broncos, and this is a huge bounce back week for the Raiders. Like, I was kind of writing them off. I thought the Gruden deal was really going to deflate this team, and it kind of lit a fire under their ass a little bit. Now, they didn't have to do much to beat Denver this week. It felt like, they made enough plays, and defensively it was kind of, Max Crosby doing his thing, getting after Teddy Bridgewater, but just, Bridgewater didn't play very good in this game, and I didn't walk away from this like, oh my God, the Raiders are Super Bowl contenders again. No, but they kind of rode that line of what they've been this year, which is sound offense that can have some explosives in there with Ruggs and Edwards and Waller. They got the run game going a little bit better this week, and a defense that can make some plays here and there. So they kind of got back to what they were with Gruden. Which was really nice for this team because it kind of felt to me like they were gonna lose their identity on offense, and I think it's still Greg Olsen as the offensive coordinator there for the Raiders, right? I probably should know this. Let me just confirm, because it felt like, their system, their play calling, their scheme, they just kind of rode the line. They ran what they've always run, a lot of play action, throwing the ball over the middle, uncorking some deep shots in there, and it just worked. So let's see, offensive coordinator, Greg Olsen, not the former tight end, different Greg Olsen. But good job by him. Good job by the special teams coordinator that has stepped up to the head coaching role, kind of getting this team on the same page, and continued great job by Gus Bradley, their defensive coordinator, who's done a really good job with that defense, kind of getting into that cover 3 mold there for that team. So big win for the Raiders. As for the Broncos, they just can't really, it feels like they can't put it all together in one game. 1 week the defense looks awesome, and then the offense can't do anything, or they're injured, or they can't get anything going, or they're having these coverage busts on defense. They aren't a complete team. They still feel like this team full of scattered talent, and that was more of the same this week, and that's just not enough help for Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, Bridgewater's played valiantly this year. this was one of his worst games. I mean, he had some really bad throws in this game, a bad pick, overthrew some balls, underthrew some balls. He is what he is. He's one of the bottom 10 starters in the NFL, and he needs a better run game in front of him, which they don't have. He needs better pass protection, which they don't have. He probably needs another receiver. I mean, Sutton is really, Tim Patrick's a nice, big-bodied receiver, but he's very redundant with Sutton. And Fant made some plays, but he really is a quarterback that if you want a good offense, he needs everything in front of him, and they don't have that. And defensively, let's face it, this defense has been solid, but it has not been what it could be with a defensive coordinator that's supposed to be elite in Vic Fangio, pass rush up front with a ton of talent, secondary with a ton of talent. They just haven't all clicked together. And I think at some point you have to look at Vic Fangio and say, is he it? Because for a while, it's been, well, the quarterback play is just so bad that you just point to that and say that's why this isn't working. But Teddy Bridgewater is fine. Their offense is fine. Sure, it's not this amazing offense, but the defense isn't doing their part of this either. So I really am starting to kind of get on board with moving on from Vic Fangio. I still have a ton of respect for him, but as far as having a vision for this team and getting them to come together, it's just not happening right now. So I'm starting to put Vic Fangio on the hot seat. And we're getting to that point, by the way, where we're going to start to have some of these hot seat conversations and where some of these head coach openings might be coming from. But big week for the Raiders. That's really what this was about. Carr continuing to play well. Henry Ruggs went off this week. A couple of huge plays down the field. And Max Crosby really making, officially to me, a Defensive Player of the Year case. Because he's been producing like it. But it kind of felt like, okay, this is going to drop off. It's, he's good for him. He's emerging as this high-level player. Well, he's actually been the best defensive player in the NFL so far. And at some point, you have to say, okay, he needs to be in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation and start talking about what kind of ceiling does he have, which I think is fascinating. I mean, he has been a dominant pass rusher that wins in a lot of different ways. He's relentless. He's got length. He has speed, power. He's mixing in some spin moves and all these different ways to win. He's been remarkably impressive. The biggest surprise story in the NFL this year is Max Crosby. Next game is Chargers at Ravens. Just a beatdown. And this was kind of reminiscent of, we've talked about kind of the Seahawks will do this, the Packers will do this, the Chiefs can do this. Some teams, for whatever reason, they just lay straight up stinkers where nothing is working. Pass protection's not working, the quarterback's not playing well, the run game's not there, the defense can't swat a fly. That's what this was for the Chargers. Now, they're a young team, and they just aren't very deep. So I think there's a little bit more to take away from that with the Chargers. I've talked about how they're missing certain things, whether it's the pass protection from the right side of the line, whether it's a truly dominant run game, whether it's just experience because they are so young. You have a year 2 quarterback in the first year of the new system, and just a lack of depth throughout the board, especially on the defensive side of the ball. You go 2 or 3 people deep at any position, and it drops off incredibly quickly. And I think it started to kind of get exposed a little bit this week, especially when you want to talk about the Chargers' run defense up front, which is just not good. It was bad against the Browns. It was really bad this week. And it was a combination of them laying a stinker and going against a team that was just way deeper and more experienced and just beat them down all game. So it's one game. I'm not panicking on the Chargers, but you definitely don't want to see that in there because that's not something we had seen from the Chargers yet this year. They've been in every game. But as for the Ravens, I mean, good on them for finally having a complete win because most of their season has been, nothing's working. Our pass protection stinks. Their run game has been very bad all year. And their defense has played pretty well, but it's been spotty. Not this week. I mean, the coverage was tight all week. You have a great game from, is it Jordan Elliott, their free safety? think it's Jordan Elliott. Or is that the Rams guy? Deshaun Elliott? I think it's Deshaun Elliott for the Ravens. Really good kind of baiting pick against Herbert. He was in, I think it was cover 3. He was in that kind of curl flat zone, just kind of feeling out what Herbert was doing, keeping his eye on him, and then triggered on the ball up the seam really well for a pick. The pass rush was good this week. Calais Campbell was a monster up front. Josh Bynes played really well at linebacker. Everything kind of clicked into place for the Ravens defense. And then, of course, offensively, this was the first time that Lamar kind of got some help, right? Like, Lamar played good in this game. It was far from his best game. You know, he actually missed some throws, but he played certainly well enough. And then he actually got some help. He got the run game, the offensive line. Patrick Ricard was really fun to watch as a fullback in this game. So just a good, complete team win for the Ravens, which I think they needed. Because as great as Lamar has been, and I think him and Kyler are the MVPs right now, the top 2 guys. As great as he's been, if you want to talk about sustainability, you do want to see a little bit more out there. Because just anybody asking a quarterback to do as much as Lamar has been doing just isn't healthy. So huge win for the Ravens, just a smackdown from start to finish in all phases of the game, and that's really what we saw. So I'm going to take a quick break, and then we will continue on with the rest of this slate of games. So I guess we have to talk about this next game, Minnesota at Carolina, and I say it like that because this was maybe the worst game of the year this year because it was such a freaking, pardon my French, turn it off for the children out there. This was a shit show of a game. It really was. Just turnovers, blocked punts, missed field goals, penalties, you name it. This game absolutely made my blood boil. I had a hard time getting through this because it was just like, does anybody want to win this game? And it really felt like the answer to that was no. And the Vikings dramatically outplayed the Panthers in this one. So they ended up winning, which is good for them. And if you want a takeaway here, it's, they'll clean some of this stuff up, and that was a big win for them. The defense played well. Kirk continues to play great. I do need to shout out Adam Thielen, who those that have been around this channel have heard me say this before, but I genuinely think he is in elite territory with one specific trait, and that is just kind of his ball control, concentration at the catch point. So what I'm saying by that is his ability to see a ball in and have the balance in his lower body, the contact balance with defenders draped all over him, for him to act like he's just playing catch out there, no matter how many defenders are on him, no matter what angle his body is being contorted, he can bring in the most spectacular catches. And Antonio Brown is really the only other player that I think is in the same, at least comes to mind when I think of this elite trait. He had another catch in this game that set up a pretty big touchdown late in this game to go up 2 scores. Kirk was just kind of throwing it on the boundary in the red zone. It was probably a ball that Kirk didn't expect to get caught, thinking, okay, we'll kick the field goal, whatever. But Thielen, just like somehow it felt like hovers in the air. He's on the ground, getting pushed by the defender, like on his knees. He has to extend for the ball, and he somehow like is able to just hover in the air long enough while brushing off the contact from the defender. It was a truly spectacular catch. It wasn't a one-handed catch. He didn't have to jump in the air and do 3 backflips to make it, but it truly was one of the more spectacular catches of the season. So I got to give Adam Thielen some credit there. I think the Vikings will be just fine. This was a big win for them, but man, this should not have been so close. You look at the Panthers, they force a fumble, setting up a short field. They get 7 points off that. They block a punt for a touchdown. You have so many penalties in this game, it felt like. Not to mention the Vikings miss a field goal before half, and they miss a field goal in the fourth quarter that allowed the Panthers to really have the opportunity to go 97 yards on like 4 plays to score a touchdown that forced overtime. I didn't think it was fitting that the Vikings won the coin toss. They go out, execute the drive, and win the game because they really did outplay the Panthers. But man, this was a frustrating game to watch. So, big win for the Vikes, all that, good stuff. Defense continues to play well. Kirk played great. Really nice to have Thielen kind of reemerge because he was looking maybe like he was slowing down earlier, but no, he's good. He's back. Justin Jefferson, incredible. They got Dalvin going. The Vikes are in the mix, as are the Panthers, but man, the Panthers are falling off incredibly fast here. The defense still has a ton of potential, but they have a lot to clean up. They were giving up just really easy completions to Kirk Cousins here on the type of stuff that is coming against the Vikings, right? They run the Shanahan offense. You know that they're going to have play-action leaks on naked bootlegs. They're going to have these deep crossing routes, and they had no answer for those things. And it really kind of made things easy on Kirk Cousins. The reason I say the Vikings dramatically outplayed the Panthers, despite this being a game that went to overtime, was the Vikings had, I think, like 450 yards to about 130 yards for the Panthers until that last drive. And yeah, I mean, the Panthers have some stuff to clean up defensively, and offensively, they really miss Christian McCaffrey. I think McCaffrey being in there really helped Darnold play in structure, get rid of the ball quicker, protect himself against that anemic offensive line that the Panthers do have. I don't think that Darnold deserves all the blame here, and he had a beautiful drive to force overtime in this game. But he surely didn't score 28 points worth of offense either. He wasn't good. The offensive line wasn't good. Frankly, the receivers weren't all that good. Even, DJ Moore played great, but he did lose a fumble. So it was just an ugly day for the Panthers offense. They were lucky that they got enough plays on the other side of the ball and on special teams to force overtime here. But yeah, there's not much really to say about the Panthers other than they're not a great team. Like, they just have a lot of different problems and they're young. That's really all I have to say. And it's nothing that I haven't said since they started 3-0 and had to tell people that they aren't a very serious, playoff team or anything like that. So yeah, it is what it is for the Panthers. I'm not super worried about them, but that's also because I didn't have these great expectations for them. I do think the defense will play better getting Gilmore back. But this was an ugly game, and I'm done talking about it. Let's move on. Green Bay at Chicago. This was kind of status quo, honestly. For the Bears, it's just more anemic offense. It still feels like we're not getting a fair evaluation of Justin Fields. He's not playing great, but there's not a whole lot to work with there either. He made some throws in this game. He made some mistakes in this game, 2 turnover-worthy plays. There was a weird play where I thought he should have gotten a free play. I think the defense jumped and he chucked it into the end zone and ended up getting intercepted. I was pretty surprised there wasn't a flag on there. They looked off sides. Most quarterbacks do kind of glance over to see if the flag comes out. But he did also kind of get screwed there. Rodgers does that all the time on the other side of the ball. And you do see Rodgers. You see him jump, and he'll drop back. He'll look over at the ref to make sure the flag is there before he chucks it up. So maybe a learning moment there for Fields. But it's really not worth, bagging on Fields. But it's worth noting that he's not playing great. He's just not executing the easy stuff. That's for damn sure. And he's learning as well that he's not the athlete he was against college players. He's trying to extend these plays and getting sacked a ton because, he's fast. He's fast as all heck, but he's got to realize the caliber of athletes he's going against. He can't run away from everybody in the NFL. At some point, he's got to get rid of the football and make a decision. So I don't really want to pile on Fields, but it's obvious. He's not playing well. The offense isn't playing well. But yeah, it's just more of the same for the Bears. Defense did everything they could, but there's only so much you can do when you're on the field so much. As for the Packers, they're just so well balanced, and I don't think they get enough credit for some of the other things they do really well. Obviously, if you've Rodgers and Adams, that is the face of this team, and that's what people are going to go to. But when I look at my power rankings comments, people think I rank them too high, and that's fine. But the reasoning is that they're just Rodgers and Adams and nobody else, and that's just not true. We talk all this time about running backs not mattering, and it's almost like that's been diluted to the point that we act like the run game doesn't matter, because there's a difference there, right? the best teams in the league run the ball for the most part really well. And the Packers are at the top of that list. Like, having an elite run game that the Packers genuinely do, scheme, blocking's been solid despite the injuries, and you have Aaron Jones who's playing his best football. Aaron Jones has been awesome. A.J. Dillon has been an upgrade to the run game over Jamal Williams. He's just more explosive and powerful. You add that on top of Rodgers and Adams, and Rodgers will elevate guys like we saw this week, guys like Lazard, Mercedes Lewis. That's a very, very good offense. And then no one wants to mention that the Packers defense is actually playing really good right now because of the Saints game, right? Everyone wants to focus on the Saints game. Weird week 1, first week in a new scheme. Well, since then, they've been one of the better defenses in the NFL. Rashawn Gary, I don't think I've heard a single person give him any credit, probably because everybody hated him coming out of the draft. Well, he's been one of the best pass rushers in the NFL this year. Kenny Clark has been a monster. The pass rush has been pretty good despite Zadarius Smith not being in there. And then they also, by the way, have the number 1 rated linebacker in the NFL right now per PFF. Devondre Campbell's been outstanding. He's been an impact every single week. They still have great safeties. Stokes is doing well. They're a very solid defense playing without some of their star players. The Packers are just very well balanced. And as I've said, nobody wants to give Matt LaFleur any credit for some reason because Rodgers is here and Rodgers is amazing. But that's the other aspect of the offense is the play calling is outstanding in Green Bay. I don't think it's out of the question to say they're a top 5 coordinated offense. They keep you off balance in so many ways, and a big part of that is because they have a run game. So that's my sales pitch for why the Packers are having a better season than they're getting credit for. Even if they don't have a number 2 receiver or whatever. This game kind of went according to plan. Packers don't really blow a lot of teams out, but they're very methodical and they're built to hang in close games as well because of how clutch Rodgers is in those big 3rd down, 4th down moments as well. So a good win for the Packers. The Bears just kind of more of the same. They got to find a way to get Fields going. I don't think their offensive design. I was explaining this. I was in Chicago and talking to some Bears fans about Fields. Yes, Nagy probably has to go, and he's not very good. But as long as Nagy is your coach, you either want to put a quarterback there that runs Nagy's scheme well or adapt the scheme to a different quarterback, and they're doing neither. I think Dalton does fit Nagy's scheme, which is that kind of modern West Coast offense, make quick decisions, get rid of the ball quick, and let your playmakers do the work. That's literally the complete opposite of what Justin Fields wants to do. Justin Fields wants to carry the load. He wants to make defenders miss, extend plays, push the ball downfield. If you put Fields in like Green Bay's offense where they're simplifying reads and getting them on the move, scheming receivers open down the field, I think you would see a much different version of Fields. But it's just this terrible combination of, a bad coach probably, and then a quarterback that just isn't a good scheme fit as well. People don't talk enough about scheme fit, and I really don't think Fields is in the right spot. So keep an eye on that. Like, can they protect Fields enough so that he's not damaged by the time you get maybe a new coach? And who is that new coach? And is it more of that Shanahan-style offense that I really like? That's why I like the Falcons for Justin Fields so much with Arthur Smith. It was really a match made in heaven schematically. As far as this West Coast kind of quick-hitting passing game, I really don't think that's Fields where he's comfortable. But let's move on. Arizona at Cleveland. This game, and I really don't want to take anything away from Arizona here because I do think Kyler is the MVP of the league right now, and he is, I tweeted and got a ton of backlash before this weekend. I said, is it maybe time to ask if Patrick Mahomes isn't QB1? I'm not saying he isn't. That's not what that tweet was about. But, there's a lot of quarterbacks playing really good football right now. Mahomes isn't playing the best quarterback in the NFL this year, and frankly, he wasn't last year either. I said that Rodgers was a better quarterback than Mahomes last year. So this has really been about 20 games of football where Mahomes has been obviously elite and exceptional, but maybe he isn't the best quarterback in the NFL. Now, Rodgers hasn't been better than Mahomes this year, but you know who has been better than Mahomes this year? Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray offers all of the out-of-structure, I almost said nonsense, but it's just magic. Kyler Murray offers all of the magic that Mahomes does. Does it in a little bit different ways. I think his escapability is a little more creative. And the arm talent isn't quite the same. But he's still, he brings that stuff to the table. The creativity, the play extension, the wow throws. He's made it more of those than anybody in the league this year, Patrick Mahomes included. But he's also playing in structure incredibly well. He's, at least this year, he's been a more methodical surgeon from the pocket than Mahomes has been. And I just think it's a legitimate question to ask. I'm not saying Kyler is better than Mahomes, but he has been better, and he is the MVP right now. He has remarkable upside. He was the number 1 overall pick. There's no reason Kyler Murray can't surpass Patrick Mahomes as the best quarterback in the NFL. It's like Mahomes is just so untouchable. Well, there's other quarterbacks in the league capable of playing at that level, and Kyler is one of them. So I'm not trying to take anything away from the Cards. And if it weren't for the Bucks continuing to look as good as they are, I would say the Cards are the best team in the NFL. And their defense played great in this game. But what I'm getting at here is Cleveland is in shambles right now. At some point, you have to acknowledge the injuries as a very real excuse. So they're out, their 2 starting tackles. They're out Nick Chubb, like the identity of their offense, and Jarvis Landry is out. That's a dramatic blow to your offense. And I watched this game expecting Baker to look like just dog crap, right? Because Twitter and ESPN, everyone is just piling on Baker Mayfield right now. And I don't think I'm a Baker apologist. I certainly wasn't of him coming out. I do like Baker, but I certainly wouldn't say I'm a Baker apologist. He really didn't have a chance in this game, man. If he was to play even like good football in this game, it would have been one of the more impressive quarterback performances ever, because he was under constant pressure. His first read was constantly bottled up. I watched this game on the All-22, and sure, on his second or third reads, if he whipped through his progressions like Peyton Manning, Tom Brady style, like maybe he could get over to see the curl opening up about a yard separation on the other side of the field. Or maybe he could have made some amazing play extension from the pocket, Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray style, to elude sacks and make stuff happen. But that's all coulda, shoulda, woulda stuff. Like, this was quarterback play at the highest difficulty for Baker Mayfield in this game. He could have gotten rid of the ball quicker. He could have trusted his guys in one-on-one situations a little bit better under blitzes. He didn't play a good game. Don't get me wrong. But did I walk away from this game and be like, oh my God, Baker's got to go and he's costing the Browns games? No, they're just beat to shit. Like, they're not a good offense right now when you take all of their good players away. Surprise. It turns out pass protection and having receivers open is important. There's also a lot of drops in this game from his receivers. So I think people are being too hard on Baker right now, and just back off him a little bit. He's actually not going to play Thursday Night Football against the Broncos. It's going to be Case Keenum, and we'll see how Case Keenum looks in this situation. I can't imagine it'll be much better unless they start to get, I think Jarvis is playing this week. The tackles, I don't think those were serious injuries. But, I just would encourage people to back off Baker a little bit. He hasn't been great. He hasn't been a top 10 quarterback. I wouldn't throw him a massive contract extension or anything like that. But I also don't think he has a great chance out there right now. Dallas at New England. Dallas is so... They're almost unique because everything feels very easy for them, which is surprising considering they're a Mike McCarthy coach team that was such a disaster last year, a team that lost a lot of players for injury, but everything is so sound offensively. Like, I think that's, especially when people ask, like, why don't I give Dak more credit? and I try. Like, I think Dak is playing excellent football. He's making super quick decisions. He's been accurate. He's been extending plays. But everything, I do think Dak has, outside of maybe Tom Brady, I think Dak has the easiest job of any quarterback right now. He has the best O-line in football so far this year. Yes, they've had some injuries, but the guys stepping in have been incredible. So he's not under any pressure. And they also run block at an elite level for possibly the best running back duo in the NFL, because Zeke looks good, Pollard looks good. They run the ball elite. They pass protect elite. Oh, by the way, he gets to throw to Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb and Cedric Wilson, who's been a frickin' superstar. Cedric Wilson, they might not win this game without Cedric Wilson, who made an amazing go-get-it 50-50 ball catch to set up the game-winning field goal here. So, among other plays. So, Dak's playing great. The offensive line's playing great. The play calling has been super fun and creative, and they mix it up in different ways. It's just, I feel like maybe I don't give Dak enough credit because I think there's a lot of credit to go around here. I will say Dak is one of those methodical quarterbacks that we kind of talked about this with Tom Brady last year, where when you are so sharp and you get through your reads so quickly and you make such good decisions, it allows you to get the most out of a really good team because you're allowing the system to run at its highest efficiency, basically, is what I'm saying. Everything feels easy for Dallas. They can beat you in so many different ways. Defensively, it's hard to know what we should think about this defense. They've had some big plays. You got Randy Gregory playing really good football. That's exciting, knowing you're getting DeMarcus Lawrence back. Micah Parsons has been sweet. Of course, Trayvon Diggs. I think Diggs is almost becoming a little overrated at this point because he gets his 7th interception. It was after, I'm not going to say he was beat, but it wasn't like good coverage necessarily. It was just a, underneath throw. I wouldn't say he got beat because it was, he was playing kind of more off and it was just more of a quicker post. So he was closing, but, it was thrown a little bit. What was the throw even off? I don't know. I know it got deflected off of Kendrick Bourne's hands. I can't speak to the accuracy of the throw, but it gets deflected off of, I think it was Kendrick Bourne's hands and right into Trayvon Diggs' lap. He didn't have a very good game, Trayvon Diggs, other than a pick six landing in his lap. So for people to say he's the defensive player of the year, I disagree. He's made some amazing interceptions, but this wasn't an addition to his defensive player of the year case for me just because he happened to get another interception this week. The Cowboys are just very complete. This was a very well-rounded win. You get some big plays from the defense. You get some big plays from the offense. CeeDee Lamb was phenomenal in this game. Just so many guys stepping up, making plays. The Cowboys are super deep, super talented, and well-coached. And they pulled through a tough game. This was a tough game in New England. Good win. As for New England, could you have imagined a bigger nightmare scenario for New England? And maybe it's just the Gilmore trade that I really thought Gilmore was going to kind of come back, round out this elite secondary, look more like 2019 Gilmore than 2020 Gilmore. The front seven was going to come together, and they were going to surround a good young quarterback with an elite run game, an elite offensive line, and have this methodical offense surrounded by elite defense. And that's just not what they are. They're clearly a good defense, don't get me wrong, but they aren't what I thought they could be coming into the year. And offensively, they just can't carry. They can't score 30 points to beat the Cowboys. Mac Jones is actually playing really good football, but their offensive line is absolutely decimated by injuries. So the run game has been not nearly as good as I thought it would be. And they're just asking way too much of Mac Jones, throwing to Kendrick Bourne and Nelson Aguilar, who had a bad drop in overtime. That who knows what happens if Nelson Aguilar comes down with that ball. So they're trying. People are piling on Belichick. He's been too conservative. He keeps punting on 4th and short situations around midfield. At some point, I do think you have to acknowledge you don't have an elite defense. You are going against a great Cowboys offense. At some point, he's got to be a little more aggressive and trust the offense, but it's hard. It's hard when the offense just isn't very good. So, I don't know. Tough loss for New England. They fall to 2-4. Their schedule's still pretty easy moving forward, and I think they can keep their season alive. But, man, this team just doesn't have the talent to be taken seriously. And I think this is, a lot of their games are going to look like this, I think. So, just a rough loss and just rough season. And just overall, where is this going kind of? But Mac Jones is good. Mac Jones is really good. So maybe they can build off of that heading into next year, similar to what we said about the Jags, though. Lawrence and Mac, there's a pretty clear talent differential there. So we got Seattle at Pittsburgh. This is kind of the last good game that we got to watch this weekend, if you can call it that. I mean, it was Geno Smith versus Big Ben, two of the worst quarterbacks out there this weekend. And honestly, this went pretty much how I expected. I didn't think the Steelers were going to, crush the Seahawks. I thought the Seahawks would find some ways to keep this thing close, and they did. And that was Alex Collins. It's kind of classic Seahawks, right? You don't know what's going to happen, but you do expect them to kind of keep things interesting. And it was Alex Collins coming out and just running all over Pittsburgh. It was really their whole offense. Geno made a couple nice throws along the sideline, but ultimately, this is going to be what the Seahawks are asking of this team without Russell Wilson, is you kind of have to play perfect to win, and they didn't. So nothing really to take away from Seattle. If anything, they were more competitive than you may have expected. But for Pittsburgh, this was more of the same. The offense really wasn't pretty, but they got some plays from Claypool, Najee Harris. They kind of have their formula here. And they got back to playing really good defense. Now, it was against Geno Smith, but TJ Watt is healthy. And I said this in the power rankings that getting him back is going to reshape how their games look, because he's just such a difference maker. And he kind of won this game for the Steelers. He really did. I mean, this was an elite defensive performance from TJ Watt. He had 2 pass deflections. One of them was, I think, third down, where he batted it down. TJ SWAT. JJ, his brother, always known for that. But he had 5 defensive stops in the run game. He had 2 sacks, and then he had another hit that led to an incompletion on 2nd and 8. And then he ends up forcing a fumble in overtime that was effectively all they needed to set up a game-winning field goal. I mean, he was all over the place every quarter making impact plays, and he changed this game. So that's really the main takeaway, is how impactful TJ Watt was. I do also want to have one last shout-out to Trey Norwood. He's a slot corner safety hybrid type of player. I thought he was a miserable prospect. I thought he was one of the worst players in this draft, and he's been okay for the Steelers. He's not a full-time starter. He kind of gets in on their dime packages, but he's broken up some passes. He's made some impacts in the in run defense, and he's been a functional player for them as a rookie, and I never thought that would happen. So just proving that evaluation wrong. He was one of the worst players at a Senior Bowl I've ever seen. He looked like he couldn't have covered me out there, and that's saying a lot. But man, he's playing good football for the Steelers in a rotation. So I want to shout out Trey Norwood. Then there's 4 more games that were all blowouts. So we got Houston at Indianapolis. Good job, Indy. Pick up a win. You beat Houston. Darius Leonard punches another ball out. I mean, if he's doing that every other week, what's that worth? If he's not an elite cover linebacker, but he's forcing a turnover on peanut punches every other week, that is incredibly valuable. I wasn't sure if he was going to be able to sustain that or not, but he very clearly has an elite ability to frickin' put on the Thanos glove and knock that thing out. It's very impressive. He also had another pick that was kind of thrown relatively right to him, but turnover machine, Darius Leonard, just always around the football. So Indy's back in the mix. Houston should trade Brandon Cooks, who went off in this game and went off on his team after the game in the press conference. But, wouldn't you take a second-round pick for Brandon Cooks if you're Houston? He's up there in age. He's not going to be any part of a championship window for you. Nico Collins looked okay in this game, so I think you can kind of build off of that. I mean, Brandon Cooks is kind of an ideal number 2 receiver for a lot of teams. So keep an eye on maybe Brandon Cooks getting in the trade market, especially after he kind of went off on his team a little bit. Cincinnati at Detroit, another blowout. This was a close game at half, but Detroit just is they're flaming out. You know, the whole kneecap biting, physical mentality, it's great, but you lose Frank Ragnow up front. Your run game hasn't been as good. And all of a sudden you're 0-5. How much can you lean on out-physicaling the other team? I mean, the offense is the hardest offense to watch in the NFL right now. They don't push the ball downfield, at least until they're down by 3 scores in the fourth quarter. I mean, they run screens on third down. They run the ball on second down. They're like, you know, Goff's no good, but they're not even like letting him make plays, really. But then on third down, Goff just throws it short of the sticks anyway. So it's just like this offense is so bad right now. And defensively, they don't have a ton of talent either. So Detroit's really bad. They're down there with Houston as far as the worst teams in the NFL. And I think they're kind of like scrappiness. It's still going to be there. But I think that's kind of wearing off the more and more this team loses and the more frustration that builds up here. Kansas City at Washington, total mismatch for Washington. You know, Taylor Heineke just isn't good enough to beat Patrick Mahomes. It's really what it comes down to. Even though the Chiefs had 3 more turnovers in this game, Washington you need more than Taylor Heineke at quarterback. That's what it comes down to. And then for the Chiefs, like, technically their defense played better, but you need to see more. Like, this is a big test for that Chiefs defense against the Titans. But Mahomes still played great despite the 3 turnovers. They weren't really his fault. You know, he had Tyreek Hill kind of let him down on one of them. One of them was a fumble, I believe. I should have written these down in my notes, but it's not like Mahomes played bad in this game. He was really special. And, they just kind of steamrolled the football team. It was close for a little bit because of the turnovers, but once they cleaned those up, it was no contest. So not much to really take away from there. You guys know I still think the Chiefs are really freaking good. They just got to clean up some of these turnovers, and you do like that they put Juan Thornhill out there instead of Daniel Sorensen at safety, who's just a much better player. And Sorensen's been kind of the cause of a lot of big plays that they've given up. So I think that is an upgrade to the defense. So you get Chris Jones back healthy, you add him, you clean up the turnovers, and then all of a sudden this team looks a lot better. It really, it's why I never panicked on them, because I'm like, there's not a whole lot to clean up there. And then the Rams at the Giants, there's not really much to say about the Rams. I mean, they're just such a better team than the Giants. I'm kind of mad at myself that I didn't pick the Rams to cover the 9-point spread in this one, because the Giants are beat up by injuries. They even lost Kadarius Toney on like the first drive of this game. Kadarius Toney had like 2 sweet catches. His run after the catch is absolutely electric. But then he got hurt. Like they looked like they were ready to run their offense through him, and then all of a sudden he's not available for them. So they're just like trying to feed Devontae Booker and lean on Daniel Jones behind that offensive line to make plays on third down. It's just disastrous. And the defense has not been nearly what it was last year, just all around. Secondary, pass rush, linebacker. I mean, Blake Martinez is out, but yeah, Giants are one of the worst teams in football. I think you gotta ask if Joe Judge is the right guy there. I think he's a hot seat candidate as we move forward here. My only other notes here are the Rams' screen game is so elite. Like Sean McVay, not only does he have great designs on his screens, whether it's flexing a tight end out wide, throwing it to him, hitting Cooper Kupp from the slot, whatever it is, their quick-hitting screen game paired with the athleticism of their blockers, and you got Van Jefferson is blocking his ass off, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, like all their receivers are premium blocking receivers, and they lean into it. And it'd be one thing if they just did it all the time, but we see that in Miami. We see that from the Giants a lot here. some teams like Detroit, like some teams have to use the screen game to move the ball, but the Rams use it at the right time to just drill you with like explosive screenplays. So that's really my only note, is they really move the ball through screens in this game, and the Giants couldn't stop them. And then my last note here on our last game is that, I think Daniel Jones finally had like a bad game, bunch of turnovers, fumbled on a strip sack earlier in this game, just wasn't doing enough. He didn't have a chance, but like just wasn't doing anything really. And I think this is evidence that he had actually been playing really good football up until this game and sheltering a lot of issues that the Giants have going on. But you see Daniel Jones have a bad game, and this is the type of offensive performance you get, where this was a slaughter. This was an absolute mismatch for the Giants against the Rams in every phase. So there are your game recaps there. And now we are going to wrap up with the Patreon mailbag. So again, guys, patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy. Head over there, you support the channel, you get access to the mailbag, you get exclusive content, ultimate triple threat. Just slide into the DMs there. Start off with mailbag question, and we'll answer your questions here on the show. So, first mailbag question here is from Josh. What are my favorite and least favorite positions to evaluate and watch? Well, we've gotten this one before, but quarterback's definitely my favorite, just because it's the most unique and so many people disagree on stuff. So, and it's just the most fun to watch. So, like, quarterback's my favorite. Receivers up there for favorite. Least favorite is probably, you might not expect this, is probably linebacker, true linebacker, and safety. Because those two positions, and this is where, like, you'll hear me talk about, like, those not being elite positions of value. They just don't do a lot throughout the course of the game. At least most of them don't, especially if you want to talk about NFL draft. Like, once you get past the top 10, you have to really search for like a good play from a linebacker. They're not involved in a lot of plays. It's weird. So they're very difficult to kind of project to the next level, and they're just not very fun to watch because most of the time they're dropping to an assignment and they're not involved, especially in coverage. But even in run defense, it's like maybe 4 or 5 times a game they'll get like a lane to really make a play, but they don't always come to their lanes. So linebacker, safety are my least favorite to evaluate because they just don't do a lot if you're watching 65, 70 plays inside a game. From Nicholas, why isn't Ja'Marr Chase a top 10 receiver already? If you've got a reason, let me know. I mean, release and route running aren't top 10 yet. I mean, he's playing like one this year, and he's reopened up Burrow's like deep ball. Where did I have him on my my receiver rankings? I know he was up there. I'm a huge fan of Ja'Marr Chase. There's just an element of like, it's like not a trial, I can't think of the word. It doesn't matter. There's like a certain requirement to be considered an elite player. And in the NFL, top 10 receivers, like they're all pretty much elite players. But I think of Justin Jefferson that way at this point. So Ja'Marr Chase, if you've got a great reason for why Ja'Marr Chase isn't already a top 10 receiver based on his on-field play, I'd love to hear it because he's outstanding. From John, thoughts on the extension the Jets gave John Franklin Myers? I like the extension to John Franklin Myers. Underrated player who they picked up. He's like not an undrafted pickup. He was a street free agent pickup. I think he was on the Rams. Imagine if he was on the Rams now. But yeah, underrated player. Not a lot of people dive into the Jets, but those that watch the Jets know he's a really impactful hybrid defensive end, and he's, as you look forward for that scheme, he's a big part of what they're going to want to do. You got to look back, and it was the wrong decision for Saleh and the Niners to keep Eric Armstead over DeForest Buckner. I think that much is very clear. But I think the reason they did that is because they run that wide 9 defense, and they really liked how Armstead fit as a guy that can step inside. He can defend the run on the outside as an edge player. He is their Eric Armstead, almost in every sense of the word. So, and he's a lot cheaper than Armstead because he's still developing. They gave him, I think, like $14 million a year. It was 4 years, $55 million, I think. So something like that. But I was totally fine with the contract. Those that watch the Jets, I think, understand that what he does for that team, and he's got an upward trajectory as well. He's a really good athlete with length and power, and does a little bit of everything for that front. So totally fine with the extension. I would have done the same thing myself, and he would have gotten paid by somebody that was paying attention in the offseason if they didn't take care of him. So totally cool with it. From Nate, got a question for the mailbag. I think we can agree on Dak being the favorite for comeback player of the year. Yep. Do we have any other honorable mentions? Derwin James is the first thing that comes to my mind. I mean, he's been outstanding for the Chargers. He's not making like the highlight plays necessarily, but he is there every single play for them. He's been rushing the passer a little bit. He's tackling his sideline to sideline speed. So, and he's been one of the best safeties in football for sure. So, Derwin James. I wish I could say Saquon, but you can't because he got hurt again. I mean, it's definitely Dak, but I think Derwin's probably second. I might be forgetting someone. How about Devondre Campbell? Devondre Campbell for, I guess it's not a true comeback, is it? But he did get, let go from the Cardinals. That's not a true comeback. He wasn't injured or anything like that. But just as far as turning your career around, Devondre Campbell's been one of the best linebackers in football. Is signed for nothing. From Joe, just wondering if you do another coach carousel video like last year. I thought I answered that on last year's podcast, but send it again. But yeah, we've hit on that. We're starting to send little notes about hot seat and stuff. We'll definitely get into that probably in January when the playoffs are going on, or maybe in December. From Devontae, which teams do I think will get an improvement in quarterback play by signing Cam Newton? Man, not a lot of teams. I think that the Eagles, you're probably upgrading from Hurts to Cam, but I think Gardner. I'd rather go to Gardner than sign Cam Newton. I think Washington's in the debate. You're kind of waiting on Fitzpatrick to come back. I just don't think Rivera really wants Cam again. And they're really set up to push the ball downfield with those receivers, so I don't really see that. But it's hard to argue that Cam would be worse than Heineke. But even then, Heineke kind of does some stuff that Cam doesn't do as far as, frankly, play extension and pushing the ball downfield a little better. That's close. I think, Miami, probably you're looking at an upgrade there. That kind of makes the most sense to me, but you got to see what you have in Tua at this point in a lost season. Texans right now with Davis Mills would be an upgrade, but you're waiting on Tyrod maybe to get back if you wanted to go that route with the veteran. That's about it. Cam is a backup level quarterback at this point. He's in those debates with guys like Tyrod and Heineke and Hurts. Like, that's who he is right now. It's fun to think back on his MVP days when he was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, but that's just not who he is anymore. he can't command the football around the yard. It's a problem. From Adam Bowman, just wondering your thoughts on if Jimmy G is on the trade block, what do I believe would be the best value? Do I think he's worth a second rounder, maybe even a first? I don't think you get a first for him. You definitely don't get a first. I don't think you get a second for him. You're probably looking at a third or a fourth, honestly, because there's so many quarterbacks around the league nowadays, right? It's not like 4 or 5 years ago where just getting a starting caliber quarterback was worth so much. Especially when you look ahead to this draft, there's like 6 guys that might be worth a dice roll. Jimmy G's probably going to get cut. You know he's going to be available in free agency, most likely, if you don't trade for him. There's just not a lot of demand for him. But I do look at a team like Washington could maybe save their team with Jimmy G. Again, like Miami would probably be better with Jimmy G. But there's just not a huge market for him. I don't think Denver does come to my mind, but I don't know how much better he is than Teddy right now. They're actually very similar players, Teddy and Jimmy G. From Tyler, how does it feel to know you were actually right with your draft evaluation of Herbert? Khalil Herbert. Kid has looked incredible since Montgomery went down. Yeah, it's right. We got one Herbert right. But I don't feel like I was. I mean, I would say Brett Coleman was all on the Khalil Herbert train. I liked him, but he was kind of a draft community darling. I liked what I saw, but I wasn't like pounding the table for Khalil Herbert. But I did think it was a excellent value where they did get him. He reminded me a little bit of Aaron Jones coming out with his kind of vision and shiftiness and good speed, but not like elite speed. But yeah, Khalil Herbert. It's been fun. It didn't look like he was going to get an opportunity when they drafted him because they had Montgomery, they had Williams, they have Tariq Cohen, who still hasn't been able to get healthy. But now they got Herbert out there, which is pretty sweet. But I definitely didn't miss on Khalil Herbert. I wasn't as high on him as some people, but I did like him. From Luke, at what point do we start to question whether or not Bill Belichick is truly the best defensive mind in the NFL? We've been seeing new systems being run and adopted through Staley and Fangio, as well as coaches like Patrick Graham and Brian Flores, using influence of Bill's systems, but arguably producing better defenses. Bill's defense hasn't been awful, but hasn't been elite or even sort of game-changing defense we're used to. How much do I personally pin on him? So, good question. I would still take Bill over anyone right now, but it's a tough question to answer. I mean, his scheme is still genuinely unique. Is it built for the modern game? I don't know if there's anything about the modern NFL that necessarily attacks Bill's defense. I just think the secondary has been pretty beat up this year. Defense was still pretty good last year. I think I'm sorry, I'm kind of talking out loud while I try to answer this. I'm really not worried about Belichick's defensive mind or the defense itself, but I do think any defense is going to look a lot worse when their offense isn't any good because you're on the field for so long. So I still would take Belichick as a defensive mind over anyone, but that said, he's lost a lot of luster with everything else. You look at some of the fourth down stuff that's kind of passed him by. You could make a case that they lost the Cowboys game because of how conservative they were on fourth and short around the midfield. And just as far as his ability as a general manager, he hasn't done the best job. I mean, obviously the drafting of some of the talent, whether it's Sony Michel or N'Keal Harry, hasn't been good. But, the Jonnu Smith signing, Nelson Aguilar, really not good value signings or what that team needed. So I would say the game maybe has passed up Bill Belichick in other ways, but strictly like his defensive scheme and defensive, like, gumption, I guess, I would still take Bill over anyone else. But he's definitely lost that luster as, like, the best coach in the NFL. I feel like there's almost no debate at this point that he's not the best coach in the NFL anymore. From Matthew, since Christian Harris has been horrible for Alabama this year, kind of like Dylan Moses last year, I didn't know that, but good to know. Do I think his draft stock will tank? Yeah, I can't. I don't know. I've never watched Christian Harris play. Unfortunately, I don't get into college in the NFL draft until, about January. So I would say yes, if he's playing terrible, it should tank his draft stock. I know he was discussed as like a top 15 player. But just as we kind of talked about a few minutes ago, linebacker's hard as crap to play. Sometimes you just got to take a great athlete and put him in a different system and hope it works. But that's a whole nother debate about if linebacker's worth spending a first-round pick on. All right, from William. Why do you think so few of Sean Payton's assistants have been hired as head coaches over the years? Because it's like all him. Like he calls the plays. Sean Payton. And it's not like the last few years they've had a great defense, but we just saw, Aaron Glenn get hired. Basically, the entire Detroit staff is from New Orleans. But it's tough. When it's tough to hire an offensive coordinator when you know that, or I would just say when you don't know how much they're actually doing. I think that's held like Eric Bieniemy back as well, because Andy Reid, I know Bieniemy started calling the plays, but it's Andy Reid's offense, right? It's Sean Payton's offense. Now that hasn't stopped anyone from hiring the Shanahan guys or the Sean Payton guys, but that makes me think that it's more about the scheme. Like the Shanahan offense is much more easy to replicate, I think, because it's just the concepts. They work. Like it's play action, drawing in linebackers, dropping in crossing routes over the guy's head. It's making your run game look like your play action game. It's much more replicable than Sean Payton just having this brilliant ability to dial up the right scheme, screens, orchestrate the right quick-hitting passing game, coach up your quarterbacks to run his offense. I think it's very different than like the McVay coaches, where it's like, okay, the terminology, the right play calls, let's implement this system that we really like that makes things easier on the quarterback, whereas Sean Payton is much more of a classic like offensive genius type. So another tough question to answer, but that's my theory on it. From Luke Olander, which starting QBs do I think will lose their jobs after the season pending each player's current trajectory? Teddy Bridgewater, probably done. Big Ben will be gone, I think. Let's just go division by division. I think Jared Goff's probably back for Detroit. I think they probably draft Thibodeau if they get the opportunity to. I don't know if there's going to be a quarterback in this class that they see as a, true top first-round talent type. So Goff's probably there. Cousins is there. Fields. Rodgers will be somewhere else probably. If not, it'll be Jordan Love. But NFC North is probably all the same, given the Rodgers situation. You get that. Okay, NFC East, I think Hurts is done. Washington should have a new quarterback. Dak's good. Daniel Jones is questionable. I think Daniel Jones starts week 1 for the Giants, but I wouldn't be stunned if they drafted a guy. NFC South, Matt Ryan will be there. Jameis will probably be their quarterback next year. I bet they extend Jameis. He's played pretty well. Darnold trending towards danger zone, but he'll be there in Carolina. Whether or not they draft someone else is up in the air. I expect Tom Brady will be back. NFC West, Russ will be there. Lance will be the starter, so Jimmy will be somewhere else. Kyler and Stafford, you're good there. AFC North, Bengals, Ravens are locks. Steelers will have someone new. Browns, I think where we're heading is probably towards a franchise tag for Baker Mayfield. he could turn his season around, but it's probably heading towards a franchise tag season for Baker. I don't think they're picking high enough to like replace him in the draft. I don't think they look at like Jimmy or Mariota as an upgrade. So I think they probably tag Baker and give him like another year to prove it. AFC East, Mac will be there. Zach Wilson will be there. Obviously Josh Allen. Tua will be the week 1 starter, but that's another situation where what does the rest of his season look like? If he plays like he did last week, he'll probably be the week 1 starter. I don't see them going to replace him yet. AFC South, Houston will have someone new. Tannehill will be there. I think Wentz will be there for Indy next year. He's been good. And Lawrence. And then out west, I think Carr is probably back for the Raiders. Obviously Chargers, Chiefs. And then we said Broncos, Teddy Bridgewater will probably be out. So I'm not going to recap it, but that's where I think we're heading. That's, 6 or 7 openings? Maybe a little more. REA beats, what's up with Baker? He's so streaky, hot and cold. I was excited to see him this year with a healthy Odell light things up. Their connection is still non-existent. I just don't think they can compete for a Super Bowl without him stepping up. I agree he's got to play better if they're going to compete for a Super Bowl. But I also talked earlier about how, they're just beat up, man. It's tough when you're not getting pass protection. Odell has been there. He's had some moments. He needs to play better. Baker needs to play better, but I don't know. It's a really tough situation. I understand why people are talking about it. I do think people are leaning more on the side of being too hard on Baker, but there's an element of like he is very streaky. He doesn't always play in rhythm. He does sometimes try to do a little bit too much with his feet. So he's definitely got to play better. I agree. I think he's capable of it, and I think once they kind of the beauty is Jarvis is back this week. The tackles should be back. I didn't even know Chubb was hurt, so I would think he'll be back. You put all those pieces back together, I think you'll see a much better version of Baker. But now Baker's hurt too, so that's the whole other thing here that makes things complicated. So that's the Baker deal. It's tough. At this point in time, it's just really hard to analyze that situation. We'll learn more about it as we go. From Bill, have you noticed anything wrong with Allen Robinson? Nope. I think that's Fields. I think that's Fields and this version of the offense. I haven't noticed Robinson not getting open. I haven't noticed him dropping the ball. Before last week, Fields had 17 dropbacks and 21 dropbacks. That's incredibly small. It's not a high volume offense. It's kind of like, Terry McLaurin for Washington's a little bit better, but or has been a little bit better. But let's be honest, the quarterback play has actually been a little bit better. Fields just is a non-existent threat as a passer right now. And again, it's not all on him, but it's Fields, it's the offense. The entire offense for the Bears has been a travesty. From Otter, if Derrick Henry keeps playing this way for another 2-3 years, where would he be ranked all time for running backs? We actually answered that right off the bat for this podcast. So thank you for the question, and we fortunately already addressed that. From Will, given the Dolphins are 1-5, probably are more than a QB away from competing, what weaknesses do I see besides O-line and QB? Are there any positives from the rookie class so far from last draft, or is there no hope? Please help us, miserable Dolphins fans. Waddle's good. Not worried about Waddle. I think Javon Holland's good at safety, so that's fine. And it does, Phillips, is that even right? Why does that not sound right? But the rookie edge from Miami. I think it's Phillips. I don't know why that doesn't sound right to me. But anyway, those players are fine. It's just I don't think Phillips is an elite pass rusher. And why this is bothering me, I'm going to look this up because that just doesn't sound right. Sorry. Yeah, Jalen Phillips. I don't know why that sounded so weird to me, but Okay, so I would say other than offensive line and quarterback, which are huge others, like I think if you fix those two things, everything else probably falls in line. I also think just offensive coaching is a big deal for the Dolphins because that's not Flores' territory. They have like this joint offensive coordinator deal going on. They have no identity. They're running this gimmick offense. I don't think they know what they want to do or have a plan offensively. So I think that's a mess. Quarterback's a mess. Offensive line's a mess. That's enough to focus on, right? Like, I really don't think there is an other, honestly. I would say pass rush needs to be better, but I think Phillips is going to get there, right? He's a rookie. You can't expect him to come in and just be Nick Bosa right away. So I think there's hope from the rookie class. It's frustrating that they didn't fix the other stuff. So I really don't think there's a huge other. I think you head into this offseason, you say, we got to fix this offensive line. We got to figure out what the hell we want to do offensively and put the right system in front of Tua that isn't just RPOs and play action the entire time. From Edward, what are your quarter season, rookie of the year, MVP, defensive player of the year, etc.? We can do that real quick towards the end of the show. So MVP, I will go Kyler with Lamar in second. Rookie of the year, Jamar Chase. Offensive player of the year, Derrick Henry. Defensive player of the year, Max Crosby. Comeback player of the year is Dak. From Loomer, what do I think the Chiefs would look back to? Would I think the Chiefs would look back to normal if they can play more disciplined on offense? Also, who on the free agency market should they go after? Yeah, I've said that. I think you take care of the football, the defense will look a lot better. They won't have these short fields. They're not going to be on the field as much. Also getting Chris Jones, Juan Thornhill in there. Start playing Willie Gay more instead of those other linebackers. There's little stuff they can do that makes this defense look not good, but not like as bad as it's been. And I think those things will be fixed. The Chiefs are too smart and they have the talent to fix those stuff. So that's why I'm not necessarily so worried. But who on the free agent market should they go after? I mean, I'd like to see Earl Thomas there. What's Earl Thomas up to these days? That'd be nice. Whitney Merciless just became available. He could help their pass rush, I think. He's not what he used to be, but it's better than Okafor. I know they're not swimming in cap space, so it's tough, but I don't think the Chiefs are that far off. I'm really not that worried. I also wonder if Mitchell Schwartz would consider coming back for a Super Bowl push here. I'm curious what's going on with Mitchell Schwartz. I wouldn't be stunned if he came back like week 15, because that right tackle spot's not great. You know, they were rolling out Mike Remmers there last week, I'm pretty sure. So there's a couple of names that they could entertain. The Chiefs are very aggressive. I mean, they already brought in Josh Gordon. But yeah, there's the podcast, episode 159 in the books. Thank you, everybody, for watching, for listening. If you're watching this on YouTube, please do hit that like button. It really does help me out. If you are listening to the audio version, please do subscribe, tell your friends, all that good stuff. And we'll see you guys on Patreon tomorrow for my Week 7 NFL picks, and on Friday for my Week 5 and 6 studs and duds player review. And yeah, other than that, we'll see you later. Peace.